Hi guys, welcome back to Intellect's Humaning. This is a video series we do for YouTube where we like to bring together two people from our community and our community of hosts to celebrate being a human and dealing with all the interesting or exasperating problems that might bring. Today I'm joined by two fantastic women, Nadia Eghbal, who's joining us from a hotel room in Los Angeles, and Meghan Kane, who is joining us from her Berlin pad, which now has better internet. So this is a joyful occasion for all sorts of reasons. And we will be talking about you and your beloved research. For those of you who are familiar with Hemming's phrase and famous talk that he gave at Bell Labs, it's relevant not just for researchers. It's about how to be brave around ideas, how to take chances, why luck favors the prepared mind. And he will just bring up people like Einstein or Shannon to make you feel more adequate and prepared yourself. But today we will talk about independent research and going back to academia as an adult, as a kind of full-blown member of the workforce, and what might lead to that decision. Both women here with me today have gone through this decision process recently in their lives. And I would love for you guys to share your journey with us and what led to these choices and how that might help us make our choices in these matters. Do you guys want to maybe give a little bit of more in-depth intro? Nadia, do you want to start while I fangirl over your book? This is Nadia's book, guys. Buy it.
Also a fan.
Yeah, I'm Nadia. I'm an independent researcher. I tend to cycle, I guess, between going deep on a certain topic that I'm very interested in and then exploring it on my own and then sharing those artifacts publicly. And then from there deciding, where can I go to learn more about this in an applied way and apply the things that I've learned into sort of like a real world environment, which means functionally I'm always kind of switching between a few years in research mode and a few years working somewhere a little bit more legibly. And I guess most recently I spent 5-ish years digging into the world of open source software and how it's produced and just trying to understand the underlying sustainability and governance models around that, which led to the publication of that book, Working in Public. Right now I'm back into sort of independent research land and working on a new topic, still very early on that topic, but broadly looking at philanthropy and sort of where philanthropy intersects with the most recent 2010s kind of tech wealth boom. So yeah, that's me.
I think Nadia. Yeah, I guess I'll go next unless you want to jump in, Anna. Yeah. So
no, I have plenty of notes already, but I would love to just kind of proceed with the intros and then we can come back to them. Thank you so much, Nadia.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. I'm Meghan. I'm a Berlin-based software developer and also applied mathematician. It's actually a little bit difficult to classify what I'm doing because with applied math, you're somebody who's kind of working a bit on a feature team with all different research areas usually. So so I spent 7 years, I guess, give or take, developing software across different areas of the stack. And I guess the company that I had the most longevity at was SoundCloud. And what drew me there was I really wanted to help with the creator economy, specifically with musicians, to try to help give them a platform to reach their fans. And I was really, for years, drawn to the building process. So building software was very fulfilling to me across all different industries. But I had this itch that I really wanted to scratch, I guess, starting around 2 or 3 years ago, where I had studied applied math and I was reading tons and tons of research on complexity science, and there was just a lot more that was happening in that area. And I would try to get as much time from a lot of my friends who were doing their PhDs or independent research to spend time just in my living room telling me about the research they were doing. And eventually, after spending so much time in my living room on my own, I decided I really wanted some community. And so I did enroll in a graduate school program in applied math, and I was, I guess, really conflicted about whether or not I wanted to go back into traditional academia, but I just wanted to find a community where I could discuss ideas with. And so, I've been spending the last year or so sampling different application areas, looking for where is the most room for growth. And I'm gravitating towards biology problems now, and I'll probably go down this track for, hopefully the next 5 or 10 years, but we'll see where this goes.
Thank you so much. I love that you said community multiple times. Obviously, as a founder of a community enriched company, that's very, very close to my heart, and I see that it plays a role in how people may proceed in kind of doing adult time research in their lives. But I'm really curious about, as you guys were talking about in my youth and then now, I'm wondering, is research a little bit like art for most people? When you're young, you dream of being an artist, and maybe you go and study art to some level. And then most people, realize that maybe they don't have that immediate, super obvious talent at it that they hoped would be there, and they go and get a quote unquote adult job. And I have observed something similar with scientists as well, who may enter a field thinking that this is a direct route toward the Nobel Prize, and then they might realize eventually, or somebody kind of breaks down their confidence, and they decide to kind of lower their standards about themselves, or find a more kind of conformist framework for their operations. So I'm wondering, when you first made your academic choices, was research a kind of dream? So are as you're re-entering research as adults, is it a kind of recapturing of that dream, or is this something completely new that never actually crossed your mind?
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways for me, I feel like I'm going back to a lot of my childhood dreams, which I feel like now I actually can actualize on. I was still just trying to find my way when I first graduated from school, and I was really into building stuff, and I still like that too. But I think that I was a bit scared about some of the incentives in the traditional academic path, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to dedicate maybe 5 to 7 years right after then to go into a topic without having a clear idea of what I wanted to do, or even just really how it worked. So I went into what felt right at the time. And now with a little bit more, perspective with what I can do now, I thought that I actually wanted to go back on those dreams.
Do you mind, Megan, just saying a few words about your academic background, just so our viewers get a bit of a context?
Sure, yeah. I did study computer science and math, and I went to MIT, and they had a really nice undergrad research program where I got to work in a bunch of different labs. So I did spend some time at the MIT Media Lab working on a telemedicine app, which sounds a bit archaic now, but at the time it was really helpful.
Maybe it was pioneering.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost a decade ago. This was a decade ago that I worked on this research team. So the premise of it was that there's not that many medical facilities in some remote areas. And so if you have an app that some people who can use that are just minimally trained in some ways to treat patients, but maybe aren't doctors, then you can triage patients better and just give them more information in order to only send people who really need the care. To a hospital that might be 3 or 4 hours away. So it's just a tool that can really help this whole process of managing resources. My background was
so what Nadia was talking about in terms of figuring out the real world applicability of your research. So you actually saw how this would be super useful.
Yeah, this was actually deployed in the Philippines. I wasn't there on the ground to see it. Some of the people from the team actually did spend quite a lot of time there, but it was cool because it actually did go through the whole process of researching the needs of these types of communities and building the product and actually deploying it. So I played as kind of a small part in that because it actually went on for years and I didn't stay there, but that was my first foray into research. And I did really like it, but it was also the timing of graduating. Also, there was such a boom in different startups to work for, and I knew I wanted to work in a really high growth environment. And so this seemed like a really nice choice to go and work in startups.
The startups as the big temptation. And I will come back to the story of the summer camps, Megan, that you told me when I was visiting Berlin recently. As you can't start, encouraging children to take risks with their minds early enough, because it kind of stays with you forever. Thank you so much. And Nadia, would you mind telling us a little bit of little Nadia and her dreams and how, doing research played into it? I know you come from, social sciences, but it's just as research heavy.
I don't think I ever wanted to be a researcher, although I look back on I've always really enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed learning and sort of writing analyses and things like that. So a lot of those skills that I've been naturally attracted to over time were definitely, when I look back and I'm like, oh, I guess that is research. But I never used the term research until partway through the open source research I did. And partly just because it's a term that I think people understand better, or just it has more legibility around it. When you say you're an independent researcher, it's it reminds me a little bit of people in tech that aren't working. They'll be like, oh, I'm an angel investor, and you're like, what is an angel investor? It's it gives you cover to kind of be I'm just a person exploring things. So yeah, maybe it's a little bit disingenuous for me to say that, but I mostly just see myself as someone who wants to always be learning and understanding new things, and then making those things happen in the world. And I see research as a way to help make things happen in the world, where if I feel people aren't talking about a thing that I think is really important, or there's some strange, observation in the world that doesn't really resolve for me, and it's and I feel we should be talking about it. That was sort of how it was with open source, where I was well, everyone says that open source projects are really well maintained, but actually I talk to the maintainers of these projects and they say they don't feel supported. There's a weird disparity that we need to talk about. And research, the research process for me is really just a way of understanding something that I feel has not been articulated before or has not been understood before. And I guess the style of things I tend to gravitate towards are things that kind of maybe sit between two different fields, or where I feel I can see, I can see why something is true only because I sort of have insight into two different places, and bridging those kinds of gaps. But yeah, I don't know that, I don't think I've had some strong aspiration to be a researcher. Although maybe all the things that I'm describing, a researcher would say, well, yeah, that's literally what research is. I think it's more just I see it as, I want to, be able to learn and understand things, and then share the things that I learn with other people in hopes that that has some tangible effect on the world.
I love this analogy that you brought up about unemployed startup people being angel investors sounding better than I'm just having lunches, versus independent researcher just means I read books as a day job. Read books and take notes. But I mean, it's amazing that the internet and how we are able to share ideas and monetize them today actually empowers people to say, yeah, I just want to read books for 1 year.
I think it is about much more than just reading books, because to me, reading books is about learning, or is sort of just learning for my own sake. But I see it as more around problem solving of I see something that doesn't make sense in the world and I want other people to see it too. But it has to be sort of directed towards some purpose, or else, yeah, then you are really just sitting at home reading books.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, I think, too, because I feel it is a general purpose term. I love to just describe that I'm just learning things, but I think I could just sit there reading books all day unless I kind of feel I should actually vocalize the things that I'm observing. And I think it's important for me to strike the balance to make sure that I'm going back to actually give those observations and also synthesize them, rather than just reading all day.
Yeah, it's very tempting.
Yeah, it is very tempting. And I've luckily I've had a couple of mentor type people also saying that too. So it's nice to have some encouragement there. I really like what you said around sitting between different disciplines and then observing questions that aren't being answered and trying to tug at those. I think this is something that's, I'm also really interested in. I guess maybe because I already worked in the software world. And I'll sometimes observe that software is super important in scientific research, but for a while it was taking a bit of a back seat as far as oh yeah, those are just tools that are we use in order to get the science done, but sometimes we're a bit sclerotic, I guess, in some academic code bases that I've worked with, but okay, they're not really taking care of the software. And that's just one example I've seen where it's okay, well, yeah, some of the, I guess, foundational things that are helpful in order to like produce software that is actually like effective and can make like the system well-oiled would be like really important to bring into like scientific research environments in order to actually be able to get the research done better.
Yeah, it feels like I mean, maybe it's just like something that I keep looking for, but I'm always just sort of surprised that a lot of breakthroughs and discoveries like come from like someone understood some other field that like someone else didn't, right? And just being able to like merge those things together. And it's weird because I think a lot of like interdisciplinary research fields can get sort of diluted very quickly. And you know, like there is value in specializing in a certain topic or really understanding it. And I think I don't exactly always know like where do you draw that line between like synthesis and background in other fields is really helpful. But then like also like owning your specific field and having this directed purpose is really useful. But yeah, I feel like any sort of like just having exposure to stuff outside of what everyone else in your field is looking at can give you these sorts of insights that like other people don't have, which often leads to just interesting discoveries.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find that like you're translating between different fields sometimes if you're sitting at the intersection of them and you're like trying to get them to use a common language?
Yeah, definitely. I'm feeling that a lot right now with the philanthropy stuff, and I'm because I'm really interested in philanthropy, and I'm also really interested, you know, in tech since I work in it. But I feel like there's some sort of like mismatch where like people in tech either don't understand philanthropy or they like immediately kind of write it off as being about like charity or something, which is like not actually what I think philanthropy is about. A lot of this sort of like mental torture I'm in right now has kind of been around, well, I feel like I understand this space, I understand this space, but then if I talk about this space to either one, then they just talk past each other. And so like, what are the right words? What's the right framing for me to be able to kind of like bring these two things together into like a coherent narrative? It's kind of like mixing oil and water in some ways. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, that's the stuff that is most interesting to me. I think part of it is like, I feel like I didn't have a traditional computer science background or anything like that coming into tech. And I came at it from much more of like, I used to work in like nonprofit sector before, way long time ago before tech. And so like having a very different lens on like where tech fits into the world just like gives me sort of like a different view on things.
Definitely, yeah. I feel similarly when like I'm learning a ton of biology in the past, yeah, starting at the beginning of this year. And I'm in like, yeah, I guess reading groups and also classes where like seminars where it's like people from math, people from computer science, people from biology. And like I'm asking like really I guess some things that can be like pretty standard terms for biology sometimes because I'm coming from the outside, but they're also doing the same things for like math and computer science. So it's also awesome because like it's an environment that really encourages that. I think it's great because also like sometimes when they're asking questions about like applied math, I'm like, okay, well, actually, I haven't thought about that in a while because it's just been so embedded that maybe I should like articulate it now and then it's clear for me too. So yeah, I actually really like this ability to be doing this, to be like asking questions from like a non-traditional background because yeah, it's also just a bit boring to be like siloed into something for your whole life if you have like one background. Yeah, you like got your bachelor's in it when you decided to do it when you're 18. Yeah, it seems
yeah, I think I don't have the focus or something to just kind of be on one thing for the rest of my life. Although there are also really amazing things that come from people that are obsessively focused on one single thing. But yeah, I feel like I need to move a little bit more laterally.
I mean, it's been academia's tragedy in the past decades that it kind of pushes into transdisciplinary research or even thinking outside its own boundaries. So I'm wondering, in your opinions, how much of this drive towards either completely independent research or at least choosing a very independent path within academia would be driven by just the annoyance with the disciplinary silos?
I think that definitely is a driver for a lot of other independent researchers I've met, where a lot of them come from academia or have considered a career in academia and then felt frustrated because they're like, well, I don't really like anyone else in my field or what my field would have been called. Or I really wanted to work on this project, but I couldn't find any funding for it. And all my colleagues thought I was crazy. And that's kind of why I'm just like, screw it, I'm just going to go off on my own. So yeah, I definitely see that theme come a lot in terms of like, why would you go independent versus, just going into academia? There has to be probably like a reason why you feel like academia is not serving the needs that you have. I think it is still a challenge for, like, again, kind of getting to this question of it can feel really good to kind of just silo off and like be like, screw it, I'm going to go like read books over here and like do my thing and figure it out on my own. But I think there still needs to be some process to bring it back into like collective knowledge, whatever that is. Sometimes that means engaging with academia, if that's sort of like the field you want to impact. Sometimes it means like, you know, bringing those insights directly to the general public or to like an industry you're trying to change or whatever, which I think academia actually does not often do very well, right? Like a lot of interesting things are being discussed in academia, but never make their way back out into the public, even though, like, to me, the point of research is a form of like public service. But yeah, I think that's like the additional challenge then of when being independent means you have to kind of figure out, all right, like, how do I make sure that I'm not just person off in, you know, the far outer reaches of the universe, like typing away and thinking, but like also find ways to make the things that I find relevant and useful to others.
And I remember when I was running my first startup and we needed kind of linguistic data and linguistics frameworks, and nobody had it. And then you kind of go up to really random linguists around the world at very different, you know, universities, kind of just compiling research that kind of comes close to what you're trying to achieve, and then you're left with this big gap and you have to go and do it alone. And I'm kind of convinced that most things useful in the real world are multidisciplinary in some ways. Life is ridiculously non-specialized, and maybe it's an interesting moment for indulging in multidisciplinary research when technology makes real-world applications possible. And maybe that's why we see, multidisciplinary research coming out of bigger startups, research labs, who are maybe less afraid of losing grant money or whatever other issue there might be for an academic group. I would like to go back a little bit to this question of community that Meghan, you raised. I was immediately reminded of, Michael Nielsen's book, Reinventing Discovery, and a couple of other, discussions around, the fact that Nobel Prizes are still won by individuals or a couple of people, even though research is more and more undertaken by larger groups. We are dealing with so much information, so much complexity in the world, so much is available, right? And I'm wondering how you guys see the role of community, whether you're an independent researcher, maybe in an online or offline community with other independent researchers, or whether you're actually in a lab, right? I mean, most people who've never worked in labs might not know that even if you work in a lab, most people will be working on different things or different parts of the thing. So I do see a lot of similarities between how these two types of communities might interact or kind of operate. How do you guys see this, and how important was the existence of community or the hope for a community in making your decisions of re-entering research?
Yeah, it's super important for me. I'm still formulating, and I guess it will change over time, exactly what that type of community looks like. But I mean, at the beginning, when I started getting back into research and wanted to first like scan different application areas in applied maths, and I was focused on the general like kind of foundational modeling techniques that are like common across different fields. I was struggling to just get feedback on if I was on the right track. When I would like find a random paper on the internet, I really wanted to be able to have like feedback mechanisms that were just even like as simple as someone telling me whether or not this is something that is really pie in the sky, or if it's something that, it's really the people are onto something. It was actually really difficult for me to navigate that at the beginning. And that's gotten better over time, like with having more of these feedback loops. I actually did get some community from the graduate program so far. It was online at the beginning, which I was pretty bummed about. But it's been, even in this semester, it's those online connections that I made have come to fruition like really fast in person, which I'm really happy about. And we have like five or six people in each of the seminars, so it's a really nice size to be able to like bounce ideas off of each other. And they like flip the classroom a bit too, so it doesn't really feel like old school version of class. It's basically like we learn the foundational concepts about, for example, molecular networks, which I'm learning this semester, and then yeah, like you will build a project at the end of the semester, and sometimes in some of these classes, you also like teach the material. So you actually like try to like own some of the current research and concepts, and then teach it to the rest of the people. So yeah, I'm looking for mostly like people I can bounce ideas off of, know if I'm on the right track, and then like also if I can give them that feedback, which gets better over time. I want to be able to do that. And yeah, just to be able to like have people who are like going through the same type of struggles, like on formulating ideas and staying the course with certain things, to have like a shared sense of, yeah, like where kind of the path that you're on. But I also found like a lot of people on the internet or in open source projects for tools that I'm using for different projects, who have been really, really helpful. And I've like had a lot of insights in where I'm going and what I'm working on by meeting those people. But yeah, so just kind of weaving a web of people through different means, whether it be like traditional or non-traditional.
Yeah, I think like from like an independent context, it can be very lonely to not have sort of a natural community. And again, like I think a lot of times why people choose to go kind of like a more independent path will be because they feel like they can't find the community they're looking for elsewhere, or they can't find like an existing place to sort of like get, figure out the things that they're interested in. And so it is like by nature kind of this like lonely path. But I still feel like finding that group of people is really important. When I think about the community that I have, it's kind of there's like two kinds of community. One is like around sort of like the meta of independent research itself. So just like other people that are, interested in like other topics, even if we're not researching the same thing, but it's just really helpful to have that like, just like people that are kind of going through the same stuff as you, and you can talk about that in the abstract and feel like, oh, I'm not like a crazy person for doing this on my own. And then there's like the other aspect of community that's more around like people that actually do understand your topic and that you can go to for feedback and gut checks and things like that. I'm being reminded because I'm sort of like, tackling a new topic now in the last 6 months or so, of just like how painful it is to start a new thing that you don't have any intuition for yet. And so a lot of it is, you're just kind of like reading random stuff and hoping it's the right thing that you're reading, but not really sure, like, do other people think this is stupid? Is this important? Like, I have no idea. And then eventually you do start tuning your intuition, right? But it definitely takes a little while. And having people to talk to about that just makes it go a lot faster. I find like I have different people that I go to for different facets of a problem or a question, which is probably, natural and good. But yeah, when I do find those people that I can talk to and feel like I can get feedback from, or just have people that help build my taste a little bit, I think like a lot of it is like in a new field or a new topic, it's like you're trying to build your own taste for the topic. And so the people that you choose to associate yourself with or follow or talk to or whatever can really influence that. I also think like community is partly about like people that you actively talk to about your research, but I think there's also an aspect of like just because so much information is publicly available, you can follow the right people on Twitter, or go through the right, read through the citations of books that you really like and figure out like who was their community or whatever, and sort of like emulate and model that. So even if it's not people that I'm always like actively talking to about something, there's sort of this weird sort of like pseudo community you can get just from like reading the right books or following the right people or something, so that you are creating that sort of like surround sound space for yourself.
I love the footnotes idea. I'm a huge footnote fan. I think I read probably like 60% of all the books I've ever read in my life because I found some kind of citation or something. And there are people who are extra guilty of that. I think like Richard Dawkins' books I would always read for, I don't know, 3 years, because every other day you would come upon some kind of reference in his book that would take you down a rabbit hole, and then you go and read that book and then that book and that book, and you're looking at a pile of books you just ordered on Amazon, and you're like, oh no, and I'm still nowhere. I'm still on page 20 in the actual book that started this process. But this is fantastic, and I think we're kind of like circling this the core question that keeps coming up in my mind, which is, which just takes me back to my favorite framework by the playwright David Mamet. He says that every single scene in a drama has to answer 3 questions: who wants what from whom, what happens if they don't get it, why now? And I started thinking that when it comes to research, it's a little bit like what, when, and why me? And these are the 3 questions that I would imagine every scene in the drama of a research has to be able to answer. And I think the core question here is the what. So we're talking about the process of deciding how to undertake research, the multidisciplinarity of it, the community that may or may not surround us, or the loneliness we might feel. But what is, for instance, if there's a younger viewer, of this video, how should one go about figuring out what they want to do research about? Or is this something that just finds you? Is it something that, you wake up one day and you feel, wow, this actually has been bugging me for such a long time. It's time that I face this question because it's not going to go away. How does it work for you? And because, as you say, the risk or the stress levels of growing a new set of intuitions about a completely new topic can be daunting, right? And people, face the possibility of this stress and this inconvenience that goes on for a little bit, right? You have to. Learning is a little bit painful, even though it's fun. But we do it because we are passionate about what might be waiting at the end of the road. So how did you hone in on your research topics? Was this an old fascination? And how did you weigh the trade-offs of actually picking this one? Were there other contenders?
Mm-hmm. I'm still actually very much in the process of going toward formulating an idea, but I have an area of focus that is narrowing as the months go by. So I liked working as a programmer because I really like building things, but I became increasingly fascinated, and it was really hard to turn this off my mind about some properties in nature that are kind of self-assembling and self-repairing, and how can we mimic these types of things, and what sorts of biological systems can we exploit in order to build new materials that can serve some needs that we have to construct buildings, and how can we turn over the agricultural system. And I became really fascinated with biological problems, which is actually kind of surprising because I really didn't like biology growing up. I had a really hard time getting through any of the exams because it just felt like it was memorizing a bunch of text that just didn't really have any story woven through it. But I guess that I'm very much a gut feeling kind of person where if I'm just continuously drawn to something and I wake up and I just want to read more about this, or I want to actually go explore some of these naturally occurring processes to try to understand them more. I want to set up a little biology lab in my house and go through the intricate, I guess, kind of ways of doing that legally. So I haven't done that yet, but I've really dreamed about this. I can't really if I can't turn something off in my brain, I really just want to go with this. And so it is something where I really just listen to my heart or my gut feeling about an area. And I actually just try to gravitate towards things that make me feel more alive in a way. And so if something is making me feel so alive that I want to read everything that I can about it or talk to anybody who's working on something, then I really just tried going with that. So that's how I've narrowed the area of focus, but it's still going to be
such a good rule of thumb. It's does this make me feel more alive?
Yeah, I know it took so many years to actually allow myself to listen to that too. But I feel I can't go towards something where I really need to find ways to motivate myself to do it, because it's going to be there's so many other things you can focus on that are probably not going to bring that feeling. So I just try to go more and more towards something that sticks like that, and that is still practical to do. So
I share Megan's perspective on that. I feel almost like I have a passive relationship to my research something where it's I have this, I'm infected with this virus or something, and I now need to expel it from my system. And the process of expelling it is the research or whatever. But I don't feel like I chose anything. I feel like something just chooses me. It's like a thing that, yeah, you just get really stuck on. You can't stop thinking about. You try to do other things to forget about it, and it just like continues to haunt you or whatever. You're just like, well, I guess like, but it's almost like not even, it's satisfying. And like, I feel like I have, like, I feel like I'm in the right place, but it's always a little bit hard for me to articulate this feeling of like, it's not necessarily joyful either. It's almost like, I'm just like, I have to deal with it. It's like in my head and I have to get it out, whether I like it or not. I wish I were not gripped by this thing, but I am. And so, yeah, from that perspective, I feel like it's always been very easy for me to figure out what I want to work on. And I feel like the failure mode I see more often in people is around like, they have a thing they think is interesting. If you really prod someone, they will have a topic where they're like, well, I've always dreamed about doing blah. But the harder part is like quieting all the other reasons and voices in your head and other people's voices that are saying, well, you really shouldn't do that. That's not practical. Or like, is that even really a problem? Or, and like, I feel like I face that anytime I'm sort of tackling something that I think is interesting. Like if it were easily understood and whatever, then it wouldn't be interesting research, right? Like it has to kind of be something that like other people are like, I don't really get it. Or like, why are you doing that? Or isn't that already taken care of by blah or whatever? And to me, that ends up like, that's a sign that it is really interesting. But yeah, I think it's like, it's much harder for people to quiet all these other sort of like naysaying voices in their own minds or from other people that are saying, well, this is not practical and you shouldn't do it. But I think a lot of people actually, when they kind of put that all away, they intuitively know like what is the thing that they might think is worth pursuing.
Do you have
sorry, Megan, go.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I love that. Nadia, do you have like people around you, like enough people at least that will also kind of will entertain and encourage these crazy thoughts too? Because I also feel the same way that sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, they probably they won't get it because they like don't like, if they're saying they don't get it, then maybe you are onto something, but still sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm actually surrounding myself with people where they go through the same type of thing, and they'll like help encourage this, or also maybe also help call me in if I'm like, gone a little bit too far.
You also don't want people that are just like, yeah, everything you think is perfect and amazing, right? You want people with you, but I think it's like, to me, that's the sort of, when I was talking about like community, having, people I talk about my topic with, but then people that I kind of are sort of like peers around the meta of research. And I feel like friends and peers that are more just like research minded, like I kind of have like two buckets for people that I talk to about things. Like some people try to just immediately make things like extremely legible very quickly. They want to like know how it turns into a company. They're just like, they're like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. They like tell you all these things. They tell you what your thing is about or whatever. And then like, and those people can actually be really helpful, I think, for pushing me to like think more ambitiously about what I could be doing, or like, how does this apply to the rest of the world? Or like, they're always a little bit of the like, what would someone who doesn't share my mindset like think about this? And that can be very clarifying as well. But then the people that I think are I find to be like very encouraging are people where they're not sort of giving this blanket uniform approval, but they're like, you say something and they go, huh, that's interesting. I've never thought about that before. And if they don't understand, they'll say, can you explain, like, why do you find that interesting or something? They'll ask like, have you ever thought of this? They ask a lot of questions, and it's like this playful space where you can kind of assume like nothing we're saying is crazy. Okay, like, but I want to understand it, and like just like grappling back and forth. And like the process of doing that is just like very helpful for me to kind of go through. So yeah, I don't think I want like extreme validation or invalidation. I just want the like, we're in the muck together thinking about stuff.
Okay, yeah, just like someone who is like evoking more and more questions so that you can clarify your ideas.
I feel like you're getting that from kind of like your new, more academic environment. Like, how does that compare to like working at a startup? Kind of curious.
That actually is lacking in the academic environment. It's not completely absent, but I think that it's also that some of my peers are like they're a bit younger, and a lot of them are kind of like trying to go down the track of like doing a master's thesis and figuring out their PhD dissertation. And I think that they are kind of just like going down like a standard path, and that's what they want to do for right now. And so then it's not really like, these aren't like conversations that they always want to like be having all the time. So this is more like something I'm getting from people that I meet on the internet or friends, or even my partner who's also like switching fields and doing research too in like a new area. So he's also like really helpful to be able to bounce crazy ideas off of.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like the internet is a good place for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not absent at my university, but it's definitely not like the style of conversation that's being had all of the time.
I'm curious what you guys would suggest to a young or prospective independent researcher or a return researcher. Should they just start looking around the internet? Should they head to the library and look at all the footnotes? How would you start if today was the first day in your life when you ever kind of considered going back into research? And kind of a sub question to this, which I keep thinking about, is how come you guys, or did you guys consider going back to your original the venues of your original studies? Because you're both very far removed from, you know, Cambridge in the sense of like, are they offended that you didn't go back? Or is there some kind of an obligation that if you go to a really good school, then if, you know, 10 years later you decide to go back to doing research, or five years later, then you're kind of expected to choose their campus? Or is this something that is completely irrelevant?
You mean like our undergrad education, or?
You know, you know, because for me, you know, I'm thinking about one day maybe doing a PhD finally, and I would probably not go back to where I did my, you know, original studies. Actually, I have like 3 masters, and I wouldn't go back to either of the 2 places where I did them. But that would be not just, you know, it's not that I'm disappointed in those institutions in any way. It's just I would be adventurous and I would want to go to a new place. But I'm wondering if there's this kind of adventurousness here at play as well, or did you ever consider returning to any of the campuses that you went to earlier?
I guess that I didn't really have like that thought of a plan of going back to graduate school. It was more, I saw that there were a lot of universities in the Berlin area, and then I was just thinking, how do I get as much exposure as possible to all sorts of problems I'm trying to learn in my living room? And this like applied math master's program seemed nice because I can have research seminars with all sorts of researchers from different labs, and then I can kind of pick and choose a la carte what I want to study. So yeah, I wasn't like following this idea of, oh yeah, like I need to get the PhD or something. I still don't actually know if I'll continue. I'll have to decide next year. Yeah, I think it was more just, okay, yeah, like the government offers these public universities, it's also free. And so I think I was just kind of like, okay, this is another thing I can do in order to like, yeah, put me on this path where I can figure out what I want to research. So it actually seemed like a much different like process when I was like applying for my bachelor's, which was, I think it's just like it's so competitive back home, and it's just so stress inducing. And yeah, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to going back like to MIT for my PhD, but it almost just feels like a little bit of a different style because I feel like I'm just like trying to find a place where I can learn. And since it's free here, it was very much like, okay, like let me write to a professor or 2 and then like send an application. And then I started. So it was like, I guess, very different style. I was actually pretty relieved about it, that it wasn't like have to take all of these tests and like clear a billion bars in order to get in.
Yeah, I only have a bachelor's and I never thought of it is like a completely different part of my brain or something. I don't not factor into my life now.
You're too independent to be confined to a classroom. And so if we kind of like put these academic roots aside, and you're newly out of the newly out in the field, trying to decide to get back into research and how to do it, where would you start? Where should people look for, you know, when it comes to like mentors and people to follow? Should they look for like living accessible people, or is falling in love with the long gone teacher enough?
I mean, I feel like it has to start with the problem that you're interested in or trying to solve. If you don't have one, then go do things in the world until you run into a snag somewhere and you're like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, it's like, I guess hard. I feel like one of the things about like, at least an independent research path is, I just feel like everyone has a completely different story and trajectory to it. And so it's hard to, it's like this bucket of like misfits that don't fit into any other sort of bucket. But like everyone has had a different path. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it just really depends on what kind of problem you're interested in. Like different fields require different sort of paths and solutions. So yeah, I don't know that I have something sort of universal, except be willing to take a lot of risk and don't be afraid of risk. And just like, I really do believe that if you have something that you're really interested in that you can't find the answer to anywhere else, and you are like ruthlessly pursuing that, like other people will pick up on that and find that interesting as well. And in that sense, I think it's a little bit of just like having faith, but I just believe that's true. Yeah, I don't know.
Sounds like a startup, right? Like
It's
you're saying, all your idols will be outliers. You can't systematize based on them. If you want to be big, you will also be an outlier, and you can help people, but you cannot, like, nobody can really copy you. And the other thing is, if you're working on a problem that other people also are, searching for solutions for, then they will be super happy.
I think that, yeah, I mean, the parallels between like founding a company and research can be very similar, especially in the early stages, right? Because it is like, there's a lot of uncertainty, like you can learn from other people's experiences, but actually your own path is very unique. And yeah, I think like maybe similar to starting a company, like if you don't have, like there are some people who want to be founders, but they don't know what they want to start, right? And it's like, well, if you don't know what company you want to start, then just go work places and like figure out like what you care about in the world and develop a little bit of that. But don't like force it if there's nothing interesting to you. It will come at its time. And I think, yeah, that's probably similar to research too.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Nadia said. I also don't think there's like a one size fits all, because I'm also like still just like very much like on this process too of like, yeah, landing on an idea and trying out a bunch of things. But I guess like, yeah, just go towards the things that are bringing more and more momentum in order to like refine questions, whether that be like consuming a million blog posts by people that you're really inspired by, or going and finding a way to contribute to something with like what you have currently. Like, like luckily there's in lots of like applied math problems that are like translate to all sorts of application areas. Like also in biology, there's a lot of space of room for improvement for contributing to some of the open source tools, for example, or like helping with documentation. So like that can like help get you into just being more embedded in that whole process if like people come from that background, because that's where I've come from, in order to just see if you like it, see if you like the environment that they're in, see if you like the style of how they work together and the problem that they're working on, just like try to find ways to generate more momentum so you can get further along.
I really like that point. I feel like it's very easy to get stuck in the like, well, one day I'll do it, or I think it'd be interesting or whatever, but the just sort of like take small steps all the time, small or big, but like at least take small steps to just like get yourself towards an answer. Because I think a lot of people get stuck in this hypothetical of like, it'd be cool if I did blah. It's like, well, why don't you just go like talk to some people, and maybe you'll talk to them, you'll be like, oh, I actually hate this topic, and then you'll know, and you can stop thinking about it, you can think about something else or whatever. But yeah, that momentum just feels really, really important to pursue.
Yeah, exactly. I've almost always regretted when I like put things off so much because I thought like I wasn't ready or something, because like, yeah, I learned something when I went, whether or not it like brought me further, or I decided, yeah, actually I really just don't like that topic. So like the first like 6 months or even like a year and right before I even went back, were a lot of like, okay, trying something out or trying an application area out and just being like, actually, I don't like this at all. Like there was a lot of that, and that was really important. Like even if I think that it's cool in some ways, like it's actually just I didn't see how I would fit into this system. For example, with like I did like climate modeling, I was studying this a bit, which this is a very, very important topic, and I follow this a lot. But I actually just I was thinking like these aren't the problems that I actually want to go towards, and so I was like, okay, I can eliminate that. Or like epidemiology problems were on everyone's mind for a while. I was like, okay, interesting to understand how this works a bit. I actually don't want to do this. So that was, it was really important to just like try things out and realize I don't like them.
This is really, really interesting. I have a couple of friends who just, they became fascinated by an idea, and they just put a Calendly link on their Twitter. And they were like, I want to talk about this, book a call with me. And like hundreds of people will book calls with somebody, you know, who has like 4,000 followers, because they work in the field, they want to work in the field, they used to work in the field, they like books on that topic. And I think we underestimate how, you know, just sometimes shouting the right keywords into the wilderness will gather people who have been waiting for this. You know, people who edit Wikipedia will tell you that there's no Wikipedia entry obscure enough that it doesn't have like 50 diehard, you know, obsessors somewhere around the world who've read every single book on this topic, or who founded this field, you know, something like, it's like really, really crazy people. And you know, collaborating with others, and this is why Interintellect and other online communities are so marvelous, because you get kind of like, you know, coalesce around different topics. That's where you will find your mentors and your future collaborators, right? The same way as, you know, collaborating on software, you know, is where most people find their co-founders, for instance, for their startups and stuff like that. So to me, that's really interesting. And actually, it's funny that, you know, Meghan, you brought up the question of timing, because this would be my last question for this conversation, the when. And I know that for both of you in your decision process, the pandemic played an important part. And this kind of extra amount of time to just reflect on what's next. But let's hope that this was the last one of this kind that would catch us so unprepared. And from now on, there will be no big lockdowns and everything will be fine. And I'm just wondering, you know, after this era is over and behind us, where will people find the push? What should be the push that we'll look for to know that now is the time? Or is it really not a push? It's just that a couple of factors have to be aligned in your life to allow you to pursue this. It's interesting because Nadia, you also used to give out micro grants, right? So you tried to create the environment in other people's lives to be able to just nerd out over something as a job.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just hard to predict the long-term effects of the pandemic right now because we're still in it. And so I'm hesitant to say anything about, you know, what is the future going to look like? I have no idea what the future is going to look like. That's what I've learned from the last couple of years. And yeah, I mean, I think like the pandemic maybe gave a lot of people, I mean, you know, tons of people quitting their jobs this year, and just not even necessarily to start something new, but just to sort of like feel something real again and like have freedom and kind of refocus on the things that they realize that they care about. So maybe that kind of like step change is going to, I think one thing that I hope will happen is a lot of people realize, oh, I can pursue the things that I personally care about, and like it will work out. And that will collectively give people enough confidence that this becomes more of a thing. That's like one thing that I think could come out of the pandemic, but it's really hard to say. We're still in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's really difficult to say. Every time I've thought that I have an idea of how it's going to come, it's changed, of course. Yeah, I guess for me, the timing was right because, yeah, I mentioned before, I really like have to listen to like when something like just becomes really monotonous, and like my job in software engineering was becoming pretty monotonous, and I was drawn more and more to these types of problems. So I like wanted to listen to that. But then like practically speaking, like yeah, like I was able to like fix my costs a lot more and like get a lot more runway. And so I was able to do this now. And like, I think that is also like really important because you need, whether you get grants or you are able to reduce your costs so much that you actually give yourself some time and space to explore. But I think like you need to have some sort of cocoon probably like in order to figure out, in order to be able to actually explore these ideas in the depth that's necessary without like kind of being like having a rush, like because there's some sort of deadline. Like I need to at least know like I have 6 months or a year of like, okay, I don't really need to like worry about something for it to be considered like for the foreseeable future. I'm like focusing on like heads down on this. So it was the right time because I was like luckily able to do that. I think that like I'm kind of like happy that I waited a little bit longer to go back and like was able to like build up a little bit of savings to do this, because I think that it puts you in a vulnerable position if like you're just coming like right out of school doing these things, because like your funding source is also probably like your supervisor, you know, it's like all like tied to like one thing and you don't have like backup options. So I think it's like important also to like have a setup where like you can opt out if you want, or you have like something to a backup plan.
Yeah, strong agree.
Yeah, it's a little bit rambling, but yeah, I didn't like know it would be like that, but I realized, okay, that's actually like pretty, yeah, it's like a little bit comforting.
I mean, it's very important to, it's the same as any creative project, right? You have to have a buffer. There are ways around it, and there are wonderful foundations and micro grants and other ways to a lot of interintellect hosts host salons to generate a side income that gives them that, you know, extra amount of time that they can just delve into topics very, very deeply. And there are a lot of opportunities out there, even if you don't have the kind of budget that where you would immediately be comfortable with just like dropping everything you do. And I really believe in asking. I really believe in looking around. For instance, we get a lot of interintellect hosts who appear in our community because they heard about us from someone else, because they asked. So just like trust your friends, trust your network, wherever you're most active, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, just vulnerably own up to the fact that you want to do more of X, Y, Z topic, or you want to see that more present in your life in some way, and just have open-ended conversations with people. That would be my advice, probably, because there's never a perfect time, right? There will always be reasons why not to undertake it. But when the calling is strong enough and you have built this little buffer of people around yourself, somehow one day you will feel that you no longer have an excuse. And today is the day when we start. So that would be my take. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. This was an absolute pleasure. And I think we did a good job at kind of exploring the similarities and the differences here. But I think there were more similarities. I think you guys manifest the same quest in different ways, but at the heart of it, it's the same thing. Something bugs me and I go until I figure out what's the best temporary shell in which it appears. I love it, and I wish you the best of luck. And I can't wait to read your new books, papers, articles, anything you may share, and see you guys in Interintellect. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for having us.